Hello, Shakespeareans. I had a little trouble with the Canvas recording session, so I'm doing this now using a completely different format and uploading it to my YouTube channel. So if you want to look at the other videos on this channel, feel free. Otherwise, just focus on this one. And if anyone else on this channel is watching this Much Ado About Nothing, it's really for my English 334 class at Murray State University. But hey, if you see something here with regard to Much Ado About Nothing that you enjoy, then terrific. Go ahead and enjoy. So for the class, I'm starting with the McDonald book. I'm starting with Chapter 8, Men and Women, Gender, Family, and Society, page 253. And what I would like you to do is make sure that you have read this chapter. I'm going to hit some key points, then I'm going to apply them to Much Ado About Nothing, but realize also they do apply to Romeo and Juliet, where we just were. So page 253, points that I want to make to you. One is that the normal occupation for women, according to McDonald, at the time during the late Renaissance, was marriage and motherhood. I would go so far as to say that was the expectation for women at the time, marriage and motherhood. But things were both culturally and socially oppressive for women at the time, but they were also starting to open up. More education was becoming available, although not necessarily readily available, not necessarily easy to come by. Not going to any kind of public school to be educated, and yet, whereas most noble women were educated to make them a better marriage prospect, middle-class women, working-class women, they were becoming more educated, especially if they had a family business that required them to be able to learn to read and to write. So if they could read and write, then in fact, the family business would have an advantage. Limited options for sure, but opening up. Pages 254, 255, there's a lot of discussion of the inherent bias of the time coming from both biblical precedent and from physiological precedent that women were just naturally inferior to men. If you go back to the Bible, where most people in the Renaissance usually pointed to, most men in higher institutions, they would point to Adam and Eve and say it was Eve who was responsible for the fall of man. She was morally weaker. She was more of a temptress, that kind of thing, and Adam fell before her influence. From a physiological standpoint, I've talked to you about this before. Frequently, Aristotle is pointed to in this idea that he laid out that from a physical standpoint, women were just the inferior side of the development in the womb, that if the fetus was fully developed, it would be a male. If it was only partially developed, it would be a female. So this was a supposed scientific justification for the natural inferiority of females to go along with the biblical precedent. Of course, now, the irony here is you've got a woman on the throne, Queen Elizabeth I, and she kind of sidestepped this whole thing by giving herself a persona that was above and beyond these kind of things. She was both male and female. She was neither male nor female. She was the fairy queen. She was Elizabeth above all things. She was a kind of being beyond all the concerns of the earthly. She was the virgin queen. She was all of these things that set her above these normal distinctions of male on top, head of the patriarchy, women, socially, politically, etc., inferior. As I mentioned on page 256, education is becoming more common for women. Shakespeare does deal with this situation. He also deals with the supposed natural, moral, and physical inferiority of women. The education of women on page 258 stimulated a broader range of thought about gender roles, and that is something that Shakespeare deals with. Changes in gender roles, or the re-examination of traditional gender roles and hierarchies. Patriarchy is mentioned on page 259, as is the consolidation of power in the monarch that was started by Henry VIII, and was certainly not let go by his daughter, Elizabeth I. Authority, though, in the early modern family rested primarily, as it says here, with the father. We've talked about that with regard to primogeniture, which is listed on page 263. It's described there. Again, that's the rule by the firstborn son, where titles and lands and money and all that sort of thing is handed down from father to firstborn son. They are then responsible for the rest of the family, hence Claudio's rather weird question. Does Hero have or does Leonato have any heir, my lord? Is there any son there? Or is it just Hero? There's the questions on page 260 and 261 of issues of marriage and the Pauline insistence on female submission grounded in Genesis 2 and 3 again of the Bible. Now, again, there are more opportunities for some women, as I haven't mentioned before. The fact that they could inherit property should their husband die. They could run a business on their own should the husband die. And yet, the second they get married, then all that stuff goes to the husband. Let's see. Anything else in here that I wanted to mention? Marriage and money. I've just dealt with that. Much Ado About Nothing is mentioned on page 268. In Much Ado About Nothing, the young woman named Hero is an heiress who is a most eligible marriage partner, and when it appears that Don Pedro will ask for her hand, her father, Leonato, appears ready to give her a choice. I will acquaint my daughter with all, that she may be better prepared for an answer. It may be, however, that he is merely engaging in a formality that he will instruct her to be prepared to accept. Same thing occurs in Romeo and Juliet, where Juliet's father seems ready to give her a choice until the family circumstances change to the point where a choice is not possible. So it's a weird back and forth at this time between a certain amount of autonomy for certain women in the marriage sphere and then lack of autonomy in other spheres and for other people. Let's see. There's a mention on 271 of two different marriage contracts, per verba de futuro. This is when a couple who promised before witnesses to marry each other in the future, and then who then consummated the agreement sexually, were considered legally wed. This is an issue both in Romeo and Juliet and in Much Ado About Nothing. That again is on page 271. And the last thing that I want to mention is the issue of social degrees, social status, the class system in England. I would like you to know this. It's on page 274. At the top, of course, you've got the monarchy, but then you've got the aristocracy, persons of noble birth, as it says here. After that, you've got the gentry, sometimes known as minor gentry, descendants of the aristocracy whose land holdings were smaller. Citizens, mostly urban tradesmen or shopkeepers. I would say Shakespeare's family was basically in that class, since his father was a leather worker. Then yeomen, we're going down the ranks here, the rural equivalent of citizens who owned some agricultural or grazing lands. Then you've got servants, laborers, and finally peasants. So that is the social order I would like you to know. Now, turning to Much Ado About Nothing, going rather quickly here, starting in Act 1, Scene 1, with Don Pedro's rather bizarre plan before the masquerade party that he will, in a mask, be the one to woo Hero for Claudio and then turn her over to Claudio once she has agreed that marriage is something that she wants to do. Why would he do this? It seems to me just part of the conventions of comedy, where if you set this up, you set up the possibility of having a mistake, a misunderstanding, two people who like each other actually having a fight. That would be Don Pedro and Claudio, or some other kind of disagreement that's going to be resolved in a comic way. Skipping to Act 1, Scene 3, we finally get to hear more from John the Bastard, who is Don Pedro's basically half-brother, I guess. He is listed in the play as John the Bastard, talking about his own social status or lack thereof. We hear of his motivation for trying to mess things up comically with his brother and his brother's friends, including Claudio. Line 11, Don John says to Conrad, I cannot hide what I am. I must be sad when I have cause, and smile at no man's jests, eat when I have stomach, and wait for no man's leisure, sleep when I am drowsy, and tend on no man's business, laugh when I am merry, and claw no man in his humor. In other words, I just want to do what I want to do. I don't really care about social status. I don't care about the fact that my brother is Don Pedro of Aragon. I want to do what I want to do, and what I want to do is to be mean and nasty. He is born under Saturn. He is waspish, as he describes himself. Saturn is a melancholic god, so he sees himself as melancholic and waspish and generally mean. He also sees himself as badly treated by his brother, who has turned his attentions to Claudio, and a little like Iago and Othello, Don John now feels that he's lost preference to someone who he doesn't think deserves it, the noble Claudio, as he said. He also feels he's been mistreated by his brother, or a half-brother, Don Pedro. In this, at line 26, says Don John, though I cannot be said to be a flattering, honest man, it must not be denied, but I am a plain-dealing villain. So he just admits it. I'm also just plain bad. There you go. Then he complains about his brother. I am trusted with a muzzle and enfranchised with a clog. Therefore, I have decreed not to sing in my cage. If I had my mouth, I would bite. If I had my liberty, I would do my liking. He's saying he described himself more like a dog. He's got a muzzle on. He's got a block of wood tied to his leg. Like there's just things that he cannot do metaphorically. But if he had his liberty, if he had his freedom, if he could do what he wants, when he wants, which is ultimately what he wants to do, he would bite. And I think primarily he would bite his brother, his half-brother, Don Pedro, where he feels he has been in some way wronged in losing preference to Claudio. Plus, as he said, I'm just a melancholic, villainous, bad person. And Borachio, whose name means drunk, by the way, comes in and says, let's go to the masquerade. I've found a way to foul up this potential relationship that is budding between Hero and Claudio, with your brother Don Pedro right in the middle of it. At the masquerade, it seems very likely that this is just a little bit like Romeo and Juliet, where we've got the different genders together so that they can pair up with each other, like the party at the Capulets' house. And so the men are masked clearly. Whether the women are masked or not, some of them seem to be, some of them aren't. But the whole idea is this is another comic ploy for misunderstandings, misrepresentations, mistakes, etc. Masks are perfect for this kind of thing. So I wanted to point you out to Act 2, Scene 1, where Beatrice, in speaking with Leonato and company before the men show up, Leonato, of course, is a man, but he's an older man, and he's not part of this partying attempt to pair off the different genders with each other. Beatrice shows us more of her personality, more of the fact that she is so witty, so smart, the fact that she is sort of dedicated to not playing into this social role, as I mentioned in McDonald, that all I have in front of me is being a wife and being a mom. Like, that's not what she wants to do, at least on the surface. She says, I want to be more. So she attacks men right off the bat. Line 27, Lord, I could not endure a husband with a beard on his face. I had rather lie in the woolen. I think you've got a note here on woolen here, I suspect. So check that out. Oh, yes, I would I would rather lie in blankets with no sheets, nasty, pokey sheets. Leonardo says you may light on a husband that hath no beard, i.e. you may light on a woman, on a husband who's either a little tiny boy or maybe even a woman. So, sort of attacking her in that way. She comes right back at him. Beatrice, what should I do with him? Dress him in my apparel and make him my waiting gentlewoman? He that hath a beard is more than a youth, and he that hath no beard is less than a man. And he that is more than a youth is not for me, and he that is less than a man, I am not for him. So she basically, in this wonderfully tortured syllogism that she lays out there, this little tortured bit of logic basically says there is no man for me because they're all terrible. No matter how you strike it, I don't want any of them. As Hero speaks or is being sort of coached by Leonato about this impending approach that's coming from Don Pedro, Beatrice has something else to say about this that speaks to what I said earlier from McDonald about some women having certain amount of autonomy and choice in the matter of marriage and then not, depending on the circumstances. Beatrice says at line 49, yes, Faith, it is my cousin's duty, Hero, it is my cousin's duty to make curtsy and say, Father, as it please you. But yet for all that, cousin, let him be a handsome fellow that you marry, or else make another curtsy and say, Father, as it please me, suggesting a certain amount of rebellion, which in certain cases, in certain circumstances, like we saw in Romeo and Juliet, that may be okay, and in certain circumstances, that kind of autonomy, that kind of rebellion is absolutely not, and that's why Juliet's father, old Capulet, at one point says she's going to go out and get thrown out in the street, and she can die there for all he cares. Leonato says at line 60, the line that I said before, daughter, remember what I told you, if the prince do solicit you in that kind, you know your answer, i.e., he's not giving her that much choice, saying if the prince approaches you, you know what to say. It's for the improvement of our family. And this comes back to the point of so much responsibility laying on the woman, particularly noble woman at this time, but really any of them, to make sure that the family has a good match, that the money stays in the family, that the honor stays in the family, that children can be produced, that then through primogeniture, family fortune passes down and stays within the family. And anything that might mess this up is a problem, not just for the woman, but for the entire family. We saw some of that in Romeo and Juliet. We see it again here. It comes back to the issue of chastity. Chastity is a big term here. I've mentioned this to you before. It applies, it's a virtue that applies generally only to women at the time, which is this unflagging, absolute fidelity, faithfulness to the woman's husband, and nobody in town doubts it. So there's no question of an offspring's legitimacy and no peril to the question of primogeniture and legitimacy. And Don John's bastardy also kind of fits into that because he's considered illegitimate. The dance starts, the partying starts, the masquerade ball continues, and we get a wonderfully comic moment at line 117 where Beatrice is talking to Benedict, but Benedict is wearing a mask. Now, whether she's masked or not, I tend to think that she's not. Does she know it's Benedict under this mask? I tend to think she does. It just makes the ribbing, the poking that she's giving him all the more delicious if, in fact, she knows that it's him under there. And the fact that he's masked allows her to step outside again of her gender role of being a nice, quiet, reserved person, which she's never been anyway, but more like hero, this sort of quiet, virtuous woman, ideal from a patriarchal sense. And she can actually stick pins in him, and it's okay because it's not him, right? He's in a mask. So she can pretend it's not him. Beatrice says to Benedict in a mask at line 118, "Will you not tell me who told you so?" Benedict in the mask says, "No, you shall pardon me." "Nor will you not tell me who you are?" "Not now," says Benedict. "That I was disdainful," says Beatrice, "and that I had my good wit out of the 100 merry tales." Well, this was Signor Benedict that said so. "What's he?" says Benedict, pretending it's not him. "Oh, I am sure you know him well enough." "Not I, believe me." Did he never make you laugh?" Benedict says, "I pray you, what is he?" Beatrice then gets the doors open. Now she can stick the pins. "Why, he is the prince's jester, a very dull fool. Only his gift is in devising impossible slanders. None but libertines, evil people, delight in him, and the commendation is not in his wit, but in his villainy. For he both pleases men and angers them, and then they laugh at him and beat him. I am sure he is in the fleet, in the group that you see around you dancing and masquerading. I would he had boarded me." There's a little pun on fleet there being naval ships, and I wish he had boarded me being a sort of sexually flirtatious thing for Beatrice to say, and she can get away with it because Benedict is masked and he's right there, and she can say that kind of flirtatious, sexualized thing, and he can't respond. Otherwise, he gives up that it's him. So we, as audience who have ironic distance, also known as dramatic irony, good term for you all to know, where the audience knows something that some of the characters on stage don't, and we delight in that kind of separation. Borachio comes in, tells Claudio, "Oh, guess what? Don Pedro's actually wooing for himself." Claudio, being as big a dink as Romeo, instantly believes it. And before this whole thing is exposed as being nothing but a lie, Don Pedro and Benedict and Beatrice, Benedict runs off saying that he cannot endure my lady tongue. That's Beatrice at line 260. And Pedro says at line 261, Act 2, Scene 1, "Come, lady, come, you have lost the heart of Signor Benedict." And Beatrice says something very interesting here. Line 263, "Indeed, my lord, he lent it, his heart, he lent it me a while, and I gave him use for it." Use again means sex at this time. "A double heart for his single one. Marry, once before he won it," the heart, my heart, "of me with false dice. He cheated and won me through lying. Therefore your grace may well say I have lost it." The it being maybe her virginity, maybe her maidenhood, maybe his respect, maybe Benedict, maybe all respect for men. The it there is really hard to say, but clearly Beatrice and Benedict have a backstory. They've got a history, and Benedict was clearly the one who is in the wrong here, led her astray for sure. The play is basically over at line 279, where Don Pedro exposes that, no, I was not wooing for myself. I was, in fact, wooing for you, Claudio. Hero has said yes, so here you go. So the play is over. No, it's not. We have much more to do. Another interesting moment, Act 2, Scene 1, line 300, where Beatrice is sort of faking, "Oh, dear, I'm always a bridesmaid, but never a bride. Boo-hoo. Hey-ho for a husband," at line 302. And Pedro says something interesting. Don Pedro says, "Lady Beatrice, I will get you one. I'll get you a husband." Beatrice flirts right back to him. "I would rather have one of your father's getting. Hath your grace never a brother like you? Your father got excellent husbands if a maid could come by them." And he says something kind of surprising. "Will you have me, lady?" That is basically, if you've got witnesses in the area who might hear it, that is basically a real proposal of marriage. And were she to say yes, and then they were to consummate that one, it's done. That marriage is done. Now, it's weird because he's Don Pedro of Aragon. He is above her status. She is there to be Hero's bedfellow, to be her companion. Heroes of a noble family, Beatrice maybe a little bit less so. It's not a great match for Don Pedro. It would be a great match for Beatrice, but she turns him down. No, my lord, line 309, unless I might have another for working days. Your grace is too costly to wear every day. Hang on a second. My computer went to sleep again. Let me open this up again. There we go. He is too costly to wear every day. So she compares him to a garment that's too costly to wear, and from his social status, so high up he is. But I beseech your grace, pardon me, I was born to speak all mirth and no matter. Your silence most offends me, says Don Pedro, and to be merry best becomes you, for out of question you were born in a merry hour. No, sure, my lord, my mother cried, but then there was a star danced, and under that I was born. She alludes, I think, again, to her rather sad backstory, and Benedict is kind of at the heart of that to some degree. Let's see. Pedro at line 341 says he's going to undertake one of the labors of Hercules to get Benedict and Beatrice together, in this case, by lying to them, by tricking them, by having them hide while groups talk about how much one loves the other one, which in fact is not true, setting each of them into a belief that the other person loves them and then acting accordingly. Act 2, Scene 2, Borachio sets up a new plan, a new plot, so that the play is not yet over yet. So the idea here is that, and another one of those sort of crazy ideas that works only in comedy, that he will set himself up in a balcony with a serving maid. He'll have the serving maid talk with him out at this balcony, and he will call the serving maid Hero. And that Claudio and Don Pedro and Don John, who are watching this scene up in the balcony, will believe that Hero is up there with Borachio, talking with someone who is not her betrothed, not her father, not her brother, not a male compatriot, anything like that, and will assume that she is being unfaithful to Claudio and then denounce her as a whore. I talked about this with Romeo and Juliet. It's bad enough that Juliet's out there on the balcony talking to herself. She shouldn't be out there on display at all. But then to be found talking to a man out there by herself, she could easily be denounced for such behavior. Okay, jumping forward, Benedict, this is the tricking scene, Act 2, Scene 3, where Benedict sets himself up as his sort of standard social role that he's established for himself as he-man, woman-hater who doesn't really like Beatrice or any woman at all. He says, Act 2, Scene 3, about line, it's about line 7 or so. I do much wonder that one man, seeing how much another man is a fool, when he dedicates his behaviors to love, will, after he hath laughed at such shallow follies in others, become the argument of his own scorn by falling in love, and such a man is Claudio. I've known when there was no music with him but the drum and the fife. He used to be just a fighter, just a soldier. And now, had he rather hear the tabor and the pipe, these dancing instruments, I have known when he would have walked 10 mile afoot to see a good armor, and now will he lie 10 nights awake, carving the fashion of a new doublet, a new piece of accoutrement for his outfits, for his wardrobe. He was wont to speak plain and to the purpose like an honest man and a soldier, and now as he turned orthography, his words are a very fantastical banquet, just so many strange dishes. He then begins to lay out what I think is a kind of fun condemnation of this idea that there is an ideal woman who is to be coveted and to be wooed for all purposes in marriage in the Renaissance. What he lays out as the ideal woman just reminds me of the sonnet that we read, My Mistress' Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun, where there is no ideal woman. The real woman who is a real person is the one to be pursued. He mentions when he's talking about maybe getting married someday, which he doesn't want to, about line 24. So one woman is fair, yet I am well. Another is wise, yet I am well. Another virtuous, yet I am well. But till all graces be in one woman shall not come in my grace. Then he starts thinking about this ideal woman, and every time he lists everything, it's just so preposterous. It's so patriarchally idealistic, and it has nothing to do with reality. So he just looks ridiculous. Rich she shall be, any woman I marry, yeah, that's certain. Mm-hmm. Wise, or I'll none. Virtuous, or I'll never cheapen her. Fair, beautiful, or I'll never look on her. Mild, or come not near me. Noble, or not I for an angel. Of good discourse, an excellent musician, and her hair shall be of what color it please God. He just looks like an idiot when he spouts such things. So, Don Pedro, Leonato, and Claudio come in. Benedict hides, and there's a long discussion about how Beatrice will die rather than confess to Benedict that she, in fact, loves him and is not actually someone who hates his guts, etc. And Benedict believes it. He buys it. He buys it absolutely. And so he realizes that since she loves him so completely, which she doesn't, or does she? Is she hiding it a little bit? They do have a past together, for sure. Then he must take on a new social role of being the lover, which he's terrible at. Hence the comedy. Line 210, this can be no trick, he says once the conspirators have left. The conference was sadly born. They have the truth of this from Hero. They seem to pity the lady. It seems her affections have their full bent. Love me? Why, it must be requited. Well, heck, somebody loves me. I better give it right back, because that's what lovers do. I mean, that's what he's been taught, I guess. I hear how I am censured. They say I will bear myself proudly if I perceive the love come from her. They say, too, that she will rather die than give any sign of affection. So he's not just thinking about, do I love Beatrice? He's thinking how socially he's being portrayed as this sort of jerk who hates all women and is rude and nasty. I don't want to be that. Someone loves me. Heck, I better start being nice and being a good man who wants to marry. And then he says, I did never think to marry. Oh, I must not seem proud. Happy are they that hear their detractions and can put them to mending. They say the lady is fair. 'Tis a truth. I can bear them witness, and virtuous. 'Tis so. I cannot reprove it. And wise. But for loving me, he's sort of trying to fit her back into this ideal that he set up earlier. It just doesn't quite work because we know the witty person that Beatrice is. By my troth, it is no addition to her wit, nor no great argument of her folly, for I will be horribly in love with her, which is such a weird adjective or adverb. I'll be horribly, horribly in love with her. Well, okay, great. I'm going to be, Romeo on steroids, I guess, because that's what I'm supposed to do. A little later on, he sort of compares himself to God in a way in the Genesis tale of Adam and Eve, where he says, shall quips and sentences in these paper bullets of the brain awe a man from the career of his humor? No! The world must be peopled, which is what God said to Adam and Eve. Go out and people the world. Well, okay, now it's a biblical precedent, which is even more ridiculous. Then he sees Beatrice coming in, and remember, Beatrice is still mad at him, still part of this merry war of wit, but Benedict thinks she loves him, and that's where part of the humor comes from. Dramatic irony. We know the real situation. Benedict does not. She comes out and tells him at line 232 or so, Act 2, Scene 3, against my will, I am sent to bid you come in to dinner. His response is, fair Beatrice, I thank you for your pains, which poetically it scans perfectly. He's become that much of a Romeo. Beatrice, I took no more pains for those thanks than you take pains to thank me. If it had been painful, I would not have come. Benedict, you take pleasure then in the message? He's speaking in ways that are so atypical for him. It just is ridiculous because this social role that he's decided to adopt is not part of his personality at all. Yea, just so much pleasure, just so much as you may take upon a knife's point and choke a daw withal. Yeah, I take as much pleasure as if you stabbed yourself and were choking to death. So, yeah. You have no stomach, senor? You're not hungry? Very well. She leaves. Benedict, against my will, I am sent to bid you come in to dinner. There's a double meaning in that. And of all the double meanings in Shakespeare, and there's a lot of them, there's no double meaning in that at all. None. She wants nothing to do with him. But in Act 3, Scene 1, she is tricked in the same way by Hero, Margaret, and Ursula. And she has a similar, although a lot shorter kind of speech of, well, I've got to take on this new social role because apparently someone loves me. Line 107, what fire is in my ears? Act 3, Scene 1, what fire is in mine ears? Can this be true? Stand I condemned for pride and scorn so much? Again, she's so worried about socially how she appears to others, not is my love for anyone else genuine. Contempt farewell, and maiden pride adieu. No glory lives behind the back of such. And Benedict, love on. I will requite thee, taming my wild heart to thy loving hand. It's a kind of hawk image of a hawk coming down and being tamed on the falconer's glove there. Jumping forward a little bit, we get Act 3, Scene 3, Dogberry and the Watch. Now, really quickly here, Dogberry as a name can be either a scruffy, nasty little bush, or it can be perhaps a dog poop. Dogberry and the Watch are part of just everyday working class people who have agreed to take on what is basically a policeman's job and patrol the streets at night and to arrest people who are doing wrong. But these guys are not bright. They mess up their language all the time. They don't really know how to do the job. So every instance of something that might be against the law or something bad that's going on, they simply have no idea how to deal with it. And we laugh at them on that basis. So is Shakespeare throwing us some stupid lower class people to laugh at, which is very typical of comedy? Yeah, he is. But then again, it is these stupid lower class watchmen, Dogberry, Verges, and company, who solve the whole problem. Conrad and Baraccio, they're going to come in spewing all the nonsense about how they're going to mess up Claudio and Hero's wedding, and they're arrested by these dum-dums who, turns out, are a lot smarter than the noble people. They take the villains and the report of them to Leonato and company and say, look, we found these people, and Leonato won't listen. He's too into the wedding, he's too into the social customs, he's too into the class structure of the society, and he will not shut up and listen to them. If he had, the play would be over in Act 3. We set up George Seacole as being the most, as Dogberry says, the most desertless man to be constable at line 9. He means deserving, of course. Hugh Oatcake or George Seacole, because they can read and write. Ooh, they are deserving of the watch. Great. You know, these working class men, a couple of them can read and write. That's terrific. Dogberry then asks about line 23, says at line 23 to George Seacole, you are thought here to be the most senseless, he means sensible, and fit man for the constable of the watch. Therefore bear you the lantern. This is your charge. You shall comprehend, he means apprehend, all vagrant men, he means vagrant men. You are to bid any man stand in the prince's name. What if he will not stand? Dogberry's at a loss. Why then take no note of him, but let him go, and presently call the rest of the watch together, and thank God you are rid of a knave. And Verges says if he will not stand when he is bidden, he is none of the prince's subjects, and Dogberry's response is, yep, true, and they are to meddle with none but the prince's subjects. You shall also make no noise in the streets, for the watch to babble and to talk is most tolerable, he means intolerable, and not to be endured. And the watchman says, we will rather sleep than talk. We know what belongs to a watch, which is a very old joke, that these policemen just sleep on the job, and everybody seems fine with it. Why you speak like an ancient and most quiet watchman, for I cannot see how sleeping should offend. Bid those who are drunk at line 43 to go to bed. How if they will not? Why then let them alone till they are sober. Once they're sober, they're not a problem. If they make you not then the better answer, you may say they are not the men you took them for. If you meet a thief, you may suspect him by virtue of your office to be no true man, and for such kind of men, the less you meddle or make with them, why, the more is for your honesty. So if you meet a thief, basically let them go because they're bad people and you don't want to have anything to do with bad people. If you hear a child cry, line 64, you must call the nurse and bid her to still the child. How if the nurse be asleep and will not hear us? Why then depart in peace and let the child wake her with crying? Ding dong, of course, that's the easiest way to deal with it. They're just the watch is an absolute gold mine for comedians. As I mentioned, Baraccio and Conrad show up. They are apprehended immediately, or comprehended immediately, and the play is over if Leonato would just shut up and listen to the watch. Jumping forward, I'm skipping that part where Leonato in Act 3, Scene 5 won't listen to the watch, and I'm skipping right to the wedding. Act 4, Scene 1, I'm going to go through this really fast. Really check out Act 4. It is super important with everything I said about women, the situation of gender, family, society, primogeniture, everything. Claudio has, before this moment of the wedding, quote-unquote, seen Hero, who's not Hero, up in the balcony with Baraccio. He's convinced that she's unchaste, that she has cheated on him, that she will bring dishonor to him, dishonor to the whole family, dishonor to her original family of Leonato, all of it. But he's going to call her out during her wedding. If McDonald is right, and this idea that women at the time, that the main trajectory in their lives is going to be to get married and have children so that the family can continue, this is the worst place that he could possibly disgrace her in this way, but he does. Line 22, the wedding is happening in full force. Claudio says, stand thee by, friar. Father, to Leonato, by your leave, will you with free and unconstrained soul give me this maid, this virgin, and he suspects she's not that, but she is, your daughter, Leonato, as freely son as God did give her me. And what have I to give you back, says Claudio, whose worth may counterpoise this rich and precious gift. He thinks, in fact, she's ruined and disgraced, etc. Pedro says nothing unless you render her again, if you remake her again, because she is spoiled, she is rotten, she is disgraced, etc., which she's not. Claudio, line 29, sweet prince, you learn me noble thankfulness. There, Leonato, take her back again. That's an embedded stage direction. Claudio has to throw Hero back at her father. Give not this rotten orange to your friend. She's but the sign and semblance of her honor. Behold how like a maid she blushes here. Oh, what authority and show of truth can cunning sin cover itself withal? Comes not that blood as modest evidence to witness simple virtue? Would you not swear, all you that see her, that she were a maid by these exterior shows, this blushing that she's doing? But she is none. She knows the heat of a luxurious bed. Her blush is guiltiness, not modesty. He is completely misread Hero's disgrace. He's caused it, not her infidelity, not her lack of chastity. She's perfectly chaste. What do you mean, my lord? Claudio, not to be married, not to knit my soul to an approved wanton, basically calling her a whore, which is terrible. Leonato then goes on to say, look, if you guys actually consummated with each other before the wedding, it's fine. You're here to marry her now, it's not a problem. And Claudio says, no, that's not me. I never tempted her with word too large. He says, she seemed to me at line 56 like Diane, the goddess of chastity, in her orb, as chaste as is the bud ere it be blown, but you are more intemperate in your blood than Venus, or those pampered animals that rage in savage sensuality. Hero swoons at all of these accusations, understandably so, at line 106, and Leonato goes on a rampage that would shame Lord Capulet for, when he was kicking Juliet out of the home. Picking up at line 123, Leonato says to Hero, who's passed out there, do not live, Hero. Do not ope thy eyes. Die. I would rather you were dead than have this dishonor, shaming you, the family, Claudio, everybody. Is it excessive for the Renaissance? Not really. Not really. For did I think thou wouldst not quickly die, thought I thy spirits were stronger than thy shames, myself would on the rearwood of reproaches strike at thy life. If I didn't think you were already dead, I'd kill you myself, he says. Grieved I had but one. There we go. This is the same kind of stuff that Lord Capulet was saying. Why did I ever get mad at nature for only giving me one kid? One was too many, because this one has brought such dishonor to the family. Chid I for that at frugal nature's frame? Oh, one too much by thee. Why had I one? Why ever wast thou lovely in my eyes? Why had I not with charitable hand took up a beggar's issue at my gates? And goes on to say, why didn't I just pick up a beggar's kid? And when that kid acted badly, I could say, hey, this kid isn't even mine. I can't even say that, because you are clearly mine. And that's what he says over and over again. But mine, and mine I loved, and mine I praised, and mine that I was proud on. Mine so much that I myself was to myself not mine, valuing of her. Why she has fallen into a pit of ink. She's completely disgraced. Count the number of my, mine, and my's there. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's so excessive. It so supports the idea that women at the time are viewed by the family as a commodity. They're viewed as a possession to, in certain circumstances, to be basically bandied around like a gift, like a jewel to another family, to make political and economic allegiances, and just as likely can bring shame to an entire family. There's a matter of ownership here, and her disgrace comes in this pit of ink that she is supposedly fallen into, and it washes over the entire family. It's completely unfair, and we as the audience recognize this. We see Leonato's patriarchal explosion of my, and all this possessiveness, and the fact that he's so wrong about her chastity and so wrong about her morality. That whole system comes into question, I think. Shakespeare displays that patriarchal system, that system of chastity before our eyes, and its worst extremes in Leonato, and we hate him for it. Absolutely hate him for it. The friar then sets up this whole idea that we'll just put out that she has in fact died. Claudio will be really upset when he thinks that she's dead. He'll make a sort of a verbal penance, then all will be well and they can get married again. It's not very satisfactory for us, because I think Claudio should be punished a lot more, but for a comedy, we got to get things wrapped up. We got to get a marriage happening. It kind of makes sense. The last thing I want to talk about is an exchange between Beatrice and Benedict, which I think is really important. It's Act 4, Scene 1, line 255. This is where Benedict is going to step forward and pledge his love for Beatrice, which he does. Lady Beatrice, have you wept all this while? Yea, and I will weep a while longer. I will not desire that. Beatrice, you have no reason. I do it freely. Benedict, surely I do believe your fair cousin is wronged.
Ah, how much might the man deserve of me that would right her? Like, I want someone to revenge. She's not thinking about love for Benedict. She's thinking about revenge for her wrong cousin. But Benedict goes on and pledges his love and says he is sorry for cousin Hero at line 272. Beatrice says, I'm sorry for my cousin at line 272. And Benedict comes back with, by my sword, Beatrice, thou lovest me. Do not swear and eat it, she says. Don't swear that, there's love and then take it back. I will swear by it that you love me, and I will make him eat it that says I love not you. Will you not eat your word? With no sauce that can be devised to it, I protest I love thee. And Beatrice returns this protestation. I love you so much of my heart that none is left to protest. And suddenly, my computer goes dark again. Hang on. And suddenly, we seem to be in comedy. We seem to be in the realm of marriage where it's like, oh, Beatrice and Benedict have actually admitted that they love each other for real. Yay, the play is over. No, it's not. Because Benedict opens another door at line 284 or so and says, come, like a good lover, bid me do anything for you, for thee, so romantic. Give me a quest. And her response is, kill Claudio. And I don't think she's kidding. The audiences usually laugh at this because it's so incongruous. Why would she not be in earnest about this? He just disgraced my cousin in front of the whole town at her wedding. I want him dead. Why would she not be in earnest about this? His response is, not for the wide world. I won't do it. You kill me to deny it. Farewell. Tarry, wait, sweet Beatrice. I am gone, says Beatrice, though I am here. There is no love in you. Nay, I pray you let me go. That's another embedded stage direction. Benedict has to be holding Beatrice in place. Beatrice, in faith I will go. We'll be friends first. You dare easier be friends, says Beatrice, with me than fight with mine enemy. Benedict, is Claudio thine enemy? Beatrice's response is so earnest, and everything that comes after this just speaks so much to the no-win situation of women at this time during the Renaissance. They cannot take revenge. They have to put up with the slights. And if they can't find someone to act on their behalf, they're not allowed socially to do it on their own. Line 300, is he not approved in the height of villain, that hath slandered, scorned, dishonored my kinswoman? Oh, that I were a man, that desire for autonomy and agency, that I could do this revenge myself. What, bear her in hand until they come to take hands at the wedding? And then with public accusation, uncovered slander, unmitigated rancor, oh God, that I were a man, I would eat his heart in the marketplace. And yeah, she would. Hear me, Beatrice, talk with a man out at a window, a proper saying. And again, reminder, it wasn't a sexual thing was happening between Borachio and the serving maid that he's calling Hero. They were just talking without any family members. That's bad enough. Nay, but Beatrice, sweet Hero, she is wrong, she is slandered, she is undone. She is. Beatrice, she then goes on to attack manhood itself and patriarchal norms in particular. Manhood, she says at line 316 or so, but manhood is melted into curtsies, valor into compliment, and men are only turned into tongue and trim ones too. He is now as valiant as Hercules that only tells a lie and swears it. I cannot be a man with wishing, therefore I will die a woman with grieving, because that's all that society has left for me. Benedict finally admits it. He finally says, fine, I'm engaged. I will kill him. And we come devastatingly close to having this comedy become like Romeo and Juliet and turn to tragedy, with this potential fight between Claudio and his friend Benedict, based on this incorrect assumption that, it's a correct assumption that he has slandered Hero on purpose, knowingly, and that it isn't just a mistake. So we do come very, very close to tragedy, but of course it's comedy, so things are going to wrap up nicely. See you on Monday.